Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tea Time History Chat with me, Philippa Lacey Brewell. And this summer has been slightly different here on Tea Time History Chat. Usually I'm away for the summer and I have to leave you and come back to you in the autumn. But what I am doing this time is pre-recording chats with guests. And actually today I'm going to talk to you for a bit about my recent visit to Bosworth Medieval Festival, where they have the Battle of Bosworth reenactment each year. This is going out on the 21st of August. The anniversary of the Battle of Bosworth is, of course, the 22nd of August. So I will tell you all about that. Now, the really special bit about that visit was that I got to sit down with Nathen Amin, the author of now 5 books. His latest book is called Son of Prophecy. I'm just looking for it here. Those of you listening on the podcast, I'm holding up his book, and it's called Son of Prophecy, The Rise of Henry Tudor. And it puts the Tudor story, the Welsh, Tudor story, right back into the narrative. It is new, I would say. I would imagine most of us had not heard the story of the Welsh Tudors before Nathen's book. So hold on, because after I tell you about my visit to Bosworth, then you are going to hear my interview with Nathen. If you are a member of my Patreon, there will be an extra bonus 10 minutes or so over in Patreon when we finish. But that chat with Nathen took place at the there's a sundial memorial at Bosworth Battlefield Visitor Centre. Very peaceful garden, other than the fact that they graze, I think they must graze sheep in the field round it. So they now have like metal gates into it, which they never used to, which you might hear in the background of the interview, sort of squeakily open and close. But anyway, other than that, it's incredibly peaceful. And we sat there and had a really good chat about Nathen's book, about like I say, about the Tudor story. And just to give you a little insight, the naming convention of the Welsh at this point meant that it was very different to the English. The English have a first name and a surname at this point. The Welsh name themselves with their lineage. So Henry Tudor would be Henry, the son of Edmund, the son of Owen, and that comes out as Henry ap Edmund ap Tudor. Henry ap Edmund ap Owen. So where does Tudor come in? Well, Tudor comes in because Owen was, so Henry Tudor's grandfather, if you're keeping up. Owen was Owen ap Meredith ap Tudor. And Owen famously marries the Dowager Queen of England, Catherine of Valois, the widow of Henry IV and mother of, widow of Henry V and mother of Henry VI. He marries her, and so he comes into the records, and the English clerks. I think his name is actually recorded in various different ways, but becomes his first name and the last name, so Owen Tudor. Anyway, there's just a glimpse, and that's me trying to explain it. Nathen is much, much better at it, but of the fascinating background to how Henry Tudor, who was 14 when he left Wales and then spent another 14 years in exile, how he comes back and claims the throne of England at the Battle of Bosworth on the 22nd of August, 1485. It's brilliant. So hold on, that is today. You will get that in just a moment, actually. So before I do that, I'd just like to remind you, if you want to support me in my work, you can you can do it for free by subscribing to my YouTube channel, clicking the bell icon so you get notifications when I go live, sharing this video, commenting on this video. This all helps. And I do apologise that I don't get to reply to all the comments, but I can assure you that I do read them. So it is much appreciated when you interact and your support. I do see it, and I am very grateful for it. You can also, if you're watching, if you want to follow this on, if you want to like my Facebook page, you can see this on Facebook as well. And you might be listening to the podcast, which goes out via my Substack, which when it comes on the screen, I'll remind myself of the address, Philippa B. So Philippa is PHILIPPAB.substack.com. Now, the podcast is on Spotify and Apple and all sorts of different places. But if you sign up to my Substack, then you get a notification when any new post goes live. So when a new podcast goes live, or when I send out the free weekly newsletter. You can, if you want to, pay to subscribe to my Substack, and then you will get the blogs when I send those out, and occasional extra exclusive content. And you also get early access to the monthly historian interviews that I do. However, the way that I would love for you to support me is to come over to my Patreon, which is patreon.com/British history. And the reason is that for £5 a month, I can give you so much back. You get the early access to historian interviews and the blogs like you would if you were subscribed on paying on the Substack. But you also get to do things like ask your own questions of the historians that I'm interviewing. So, for instance, today with Nathan's interview, I had a list of questions from patrons, which I put to Nathan, and that it goes exclusively into Patreon. So everyone gets to see the main interviews, but patrons get to see extra content and actually have had opportunity to contribute to that content. So I would love to welcome Noah, Mary Liesel, Lynn, Stephanie, and Jessica, who have all joined my Patreon recently. And I've got something else to tell you about that in a short while. But let's get to Bosworth, shall we? Let's get to Bosworth. So, two kings, one day. This is the slogan of Bosworth Visitor Centre. If you go on any normal day, if you like, when there's nothing on, it really is an incredibly peaceful place to go. The visitor centre, I think, is really good. I quite like it. I didn't get a chance to go into it this time because there was everything going on. Each year they have the medieval festival, Bosworth Medieval Festival, where they have various different people there, speakers. Like, so Nathan was speaking. I listened to Nicola Tallis speak. Both of them I'll be seeing again very soon, and so will you if you are on the Rise of the Tudors tour, which I'm running in September. Both Nathan and Nicola, and Julian Humphreys was there. He's also going to be on the Rise of the Tudors tour in next month, and lots of different stalls. But the really cool thing, I thought, and it's sort of cool in a geeky way, but everyone's there doing it, is enjoying the reenactment. Now, it's not just the battle reenactment on the field that they set up as, it's not the exact field, but the battlefield. They camp. So they have tents that are authentically recreated. They have, the cooking stations, the medical tents. So I did go around and take a few photos, obviously, while I was there. So the battle reenactment, I suppose it's maybe like a mini version. I haven't been to a battle reenactment since I went to the Battle of Tewkesbury reenactment years and years and years ago, and that was so big that I couldn't actually either see or hear what was going on. So this was much better for me, being only 5'3". I could actually see because it wasn't quite as busy and it wasn't quite as big a field. So to me, it seemed like a bit of a mini version. So you still had all the different what do you call them? Platoons? I don't know. I really should get up on my military jargon. And they came into the battle as they would have done at the timings they would have done, and met the other side as they would have done. We had the archers, of course, famous English archers there. The banners are flying. People are in the correct livery. The the suits of armor, and well, so what people were wearing as protective gear differed across the battlefield, as it would have done in reality, because different people could afford different things. Not everybody went into battle in a full suit of armor, of course. They're incredibly expensive. And I got chatting to, courtesy of Nathen introducing me actually afterwards, I got chatting to some of the reenactors, and they were explaining how the suits of armor that they're wearing, and would have been the same in 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth, for example, are made to measure. They have to fit well, otherwise you can't move in them. They'd be painful to wear, because of course there's no give in them. So if you've got a bit rubbing, you can imagine that's going to start getting painful, and that's going to reduce your ability to fight and to protect yourself in combat. So that was fascinating. And of course, the reason I suppose, similar to as it would have been, you've got various people who are taking part in the reenactment who can all afford slightly different things as well. Nowadays, and Nathen told me this, not one of the guys, so but I'm going to assume that he's correct. One of these full suits of armor could cost up to £10,000. So it's not a cheap hobby. Honestly, it looked so much fun, though. It looked so much fun. The battle scene is sort of well, as an outside observer, looked like almost the smallest part. It's the prepping and then the aftermath, which I'll come on to in a minute. So you've got the forces of Henry Tudor meeting the forces of Richard III, of course. Richard III, played by a lovely man. I'm afraid I can't remember his name. I didn't meet him directly, but well, I sort of did. But anyway, he was chatting to Nathen, and I'll come on to that again in a minute as well. So you've got the Richard III. So there's someone playing Richard III. There's someone playing Henry VIII. Excuse me, Henry Tudor, who'll become Henry VII. You'll see him in a moment. But just watching from the sidelines, you get to see them actually clash. They have weapons that, of course, they're not going to start smacking each other hard with them, but they're really well recreated. The things, honestly, that humans have put together to do damage to other humans is quite frightening, but it's for a purpose. In this case, so you see them clash. There was a guy, a brilliant, again, lovely man, dressed up as, he was representing one of the Stanley Brothers, who was actually commentating, which was great, because the Stanleys did sit on the sidelines for the majority of the battle, only coming in right at the last minute to decide, well, it's still whether they knew what they were going to do or not, but they came in at the last minute, if you like, in support of Henry Tudor, as they saw Richard floundering. But it could have been that was always going to be the case. So you see them clashing, and then of course you see, I was well positioned for this actually, just by accident. You see Richard get felled, basically. He nothing gruesome. It's good family entertainment. Now, the guy who played Richard, and I'm so sorry that I've forgotten his name, but he rode in on a horse, which I was that's the one bit I was really, really looking forward to seeing, like people galloping in on horses. And unfortunately, he fell off. He actually came off his horse, so it was all slightly out of order as to what would have happened. But anyway, it was fine. They carried on, and I mean, we all know the ending, although it's very fun in that the crowd sort of acts like we don't know what the ending is. So that was great. So here is Richard. For those of you listening on the podcast, I have got some photographs up of the day, which you can go to my YouTube and check out when you get a chance, if you wish. So Richard's here, starting to go one-on-one, and losing. And so Stanley picks up the crown, which has come off Richard's helmet. Richard famously wears a specially made crown that fits on his helmet into battle. And this falls or is taken from him by Henry Tudor's stepfather, Stanley, and placed on his head. Now, the guy playing Henry here is slightly older than Henry would have been here. Henry would have been 28. Is that right? He's 14 when he's in exile, 14 when he goes into exile, 14 years in exile. So there was actually a failed invasion. It didn't happen in 1483. So really early on, like a few months into Richard III's reign, which if you hang on and listen to my talk, to my little interview with Nathan, say little, it's fairly decent actually, then you'll hear him talk about that. I asked him about that. But not only was there the battle, so I talked about there's this camp as well. So you can walk around the camp and they're so happy to talk to you about everything really, what they're wearing, what they're doing, what their role on the battlefield is. There's plenty of women there as well, because the women were there with their husbands. They would be helping, certainly when they were there, helping them dress. There's a picture up at the moment of sort of a food tent. I'm so sorry to the woman I managed to get capture in the middle of eating. I didn't realize that when I took the photo. I literally just went click and walked on. So but yeah, there's a food prep tent here, and yeah, so you can get an idea of what it would have been like to actually be at one of these camps. And there's a order to it and an order to the battle, which I don't know, it's kind of like it seems very respectful in some ways, if you know what I mean. They sort of, they camped out and they meet at a particular place at a particular time and see who's got the best tactics and the best skills. So we met a few of the reenactors, like I say, courtesy of Nathan, who was with me and introduced me. So any of you, if you ever see me anywhere, please do, because I know a few of you have been in touch since when you've seen me share the photos. Please do just, come and say hi. I'm actually quite shy. So I'm probably not going to launch into the camp and say hi. So please do come and grab me. It was fabulous. Honestly, once I got talking, so this guy, still in his armor here in the middle of the photograph on the left, his name is Tom. He, if you have a look on my Instagram, if you haven't seen it already, he is the guy in the suit of armor doing press ups. He also did do a cartwheel. If you look on, I didn't capture that as well, but Nathan, I think, has. So if you look on Nathen Amin's Instagram, he captured that really well. But yeah, Tom he was showing us basically how you could move in a suit of armor that is well made for you. It's incredibly heavy, but when people talk about the women's dresses in Tudor times, if you're wearing a massive dress, people go, oh, it must be really heavy, but it's distributed. So I was asking Tom, I know in total that the suit of armor weighs a lot, but is it evenly distributed? And it is. I mean, can't underestimate how much harder it is to move with any weight on you. If any of you have ever done any runs with weighted vests or things like that, you can, it's harder. Or if any of you, like myself, have put on a bit of weight and try and do something that you used to do, like go for a little run, it's harder, right? They've got their suits of armor on, really well made. His is a full suit of armor. It looks amazing. And because when I saw them, this was after the battle, it felt a little bit intrusive. Like I felt like I was maybe being a little bit intrusive because they were getting undressed. But they have got layer upon layer upon layer. So underneath they will have like a thick jacket, maybe waistcoat. I'm not sure if there was sleeves in it. I think maybe there was actually. So it was this thick material or padding, basically, actually. And one of the other guys was explaining to me that so the armor would hopefully protect you from being pierced by probably not a sword, well, maybe a sword, but they had like I don't know, all these brutal looking metal things that you could hit somebody with. And you know, so the metal armor you're hoping prevents that piercing. But if that was directly or if that was close to your skin, maybe only uh, uh, got a thin piece of material in between, that's going to break your bones. The force of being hit by one of these weapons is still going to break your bones. So this padded jacket takes some of that energy out of the blow, and hopefully you'll just have a few bruises. They all have actual injuries from where things have gone a bit wrong. I think Tom said he'd got an arrow in the jaw once or somewhere in the face. He'd got cuts across hands. I mean, I showed my finger and sort of got in with the battle hardened crew a little bit. I showed him my finger, but yeah. So I can't. This was the first time I'd been to Bosworth. Like I said, I've been to the reenactment at Tewkesbury, which is the famous Battle of Tewkesbury, 1471. And before, but many years ago. So I went along to this really specifically to speak to Nathen, but I am so glad I went, and hopefully it will continue for years to come, because I will definitely be making my way over there again next year. There was a series of talks this year. I don't know if they've done that before, but Nathen was talking, like I say, Nicola Tallis as well. Philippa Langley was there, and Matt Lewis. So there's a great lineup of speakers there as well. But like I say, I got to speak to Nathen. So I won't hold you up for much longer, because I'm sure you're very interested to hear what Nathen had to say. Before I move on, there's a couple of things. You can see a picture there of Nathen taking a picture of my book. In his hand is my book with all the post-it notes, and I can verify that is my book. Here it is. If you're listening on the podcast, I've basically made notes on Nathen's book as I've gone through, using pink post-it notes, which have gone practically white. Actually, the ones at the back you can see are much pinker, but they've gone practically white in the sunshine. And this was my way of remembering the key points out of the book that I wanted to I don't know, that surprised me, or I wanted to speak to Nathen about, or I just wanted to remember. So that is in fact the same book that Nathen, so that was on Nathen's Instagram. And this is him in the middle talking to the guy who was playing Richard III that day. And I didn't mean to, but I managed to get him with his finger sort of up, sort of as if he's telling Richard something. So I ran that as a caption competition. So thank you for everybody who does follow me on Instagram, or like I say, follows me on YouTube or Facebook and comments. I really do appreciate your I appreciate your time, and I love hearing from you. So we've got some fantastic captions there. So Nathen saying to Richard, now hang on a minute. That was from Abby. Kim, you are a very bad man. And Tudor's Mania, take off this crown. Richard's standing there. This is before the battle, by the way. So before he fell off his horse, bless him. I bet he had a couple of bruises from that. He got straight up, I have to say. He bounced. It was very impressive. Emma's like, and another thing, Richard. Liz, what do you mean I'm going to lose? And Jeannie, oh no, you didn't. Chelsea, I don't like your attitude. It's a fair one. History girl, how many times do I have to tell you Henry Tudor is going to win? So those are all. So thank you so much for everyone who did respond to that on my Instagram story. And one more thing, I think this is the last thing before we get on to a couple more things before I get on to the to you talk with Nathen. The latest in the Tour Talk series is available on Patreon as of tomorrow, the 22nd of August. It's Tracy Borman talking about Anne Boleyn and Elizabeth I, the mother and daughter who changed history. This is based on her book, of course, of the same title. And she joins us every year on the Anne Boleyn tour in May. And the talk that is now, it's going to be available from tomorrow in my Patreon, is the first talk Tracy ever did about that book. So you can join Patreon for £5 a month. There's lots in there. This is the fourth of the Tour Talks series available. So these are all talks which happened on a British history tour. You can already see Kate McCaffrey's talk about Anne Boleyn's Book of Hours, and then her talk that followed on from that the following year, Networks of Politics and Power, Anne Boleyn and her 2 books of hours. You can see Professor James Clark's talk on Anne's religion, Henry's Reformation. Again, a brilliant talk if you want to learn something new. So Kate's, and then Tracy's, who you may have heard her talk, but this is the first time she ever gave this talk. So it's very exciting that we had it on our tour. And now if you join my Patreon, or you are already a patron, you can see that as of the 22nd of August. So tomorrow as this goes out. And then one other thing before we get on to Nathen, there's still time, I think, maybe if you're a fast reader, but to pick up Helen Carr's book, The Red Prince, John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster. This is our next book in book club over again in Patreon, this is all part and parcel of the same membership. You don't need to do, there's no levels. You can actually contribute more if you would like to, but that is purely your choice. And obviously I'm forever grateful, but I would love to have you in there. It's a fantastically interactive place, my Patreon. We do have book club, which gives us an opportunity to actually see each other. We do it by Zoom. And like I say, our next book is Helen Carr's book about John of Gaunt, which if you're interested in Tudor history, if you're interested in the Wars of the Roses, you want to know about John of Gaunt. I promise you want to know about John of Gaunt. And we're meeting on the 8th of September. And if you're in Patreon, then obviously I send all the details of when, how, where to join, etc., etc. Okay, so I will now shush a little bit. You will hear me again because obviously I'm going to be asking Nathen some questions, but enjoy this interview. And next week, I have the final sort of guest spot for the summer. I am speaking to Amanda Glover about her research into the letter that Anne Boleyn is supposed to have penned from the Tower of London when she was there imprisoned. She's supposed to have penned it on I think it was the 6th of May, if I remember rightly. So she was taken to the Tower on the 2nd of May. So this is supposed to be really quite soon into her incarceration, and she writes this letter to Henry VIII, or does she? We will be discussing that. So I'll be discussing that with Amanda. It is actually my birthday on the 28th of August, so I am off doing some stuff for my birthday. I'm also doing part of that is history related. So do keep looking. If you want to check out what I'm doing, check out my Instagram at British_history_tours to see what I'm up to. Okay. I keep promising. Now I will give it to you. This is my fantastic interview with Nathen Amin about Henry Tudor and his Welsh lineage and how he got to the point of being at the Battle of Bosworth and taking the English crown. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know in the comments. I'll see you all soon. That was great. That's the first time I've heard you talk, actually.
Yeah.
And
that was a good audience. They laughed. I can do the same talk next week, and it'll just be silence. Like the Adlibs aren't necessarily Adlibs. It's almost like a comedy sketch at some points. And it blows my mind. So you'll sit and talk, and you'll just get nothing. And that talk, it was just perfect. Yeah, I was happy with that. That was a good one.
Oh, great. And your book, Son of Prophecy, only came out
July the 15th.
Okay, so about a month
1 month,
ago.
yeah.
And how's it going?
Seems to be good. I think you never really know with sales-wise, but I mean, all the big name historians seem to be doing that, giving them a thumbs up. Everyone I've read says it's good. Obviously, I was concerned it might be too Welsh, but that doesn't seem to be the problem.
No, I think so. I have read it all because I went away on holiday, and yours was the book that I took, and I think that with the Tudors, there's this danger that it's just a story retold again and again, and nothing really new is being added. It might be a slightly different angle or whatever. You actually have written something new and put the Welsh Tudors back in the story where they clearly deserve to be, and probably before your book, I don't think really put in the narrative.
So it's a weird thing that's happened in that in Wales, for example, there's a big interest in the Owain Glyndŵr War of Independence or uprising, depending on your political viewpoint of it. And it's all about Glyndŵr. Glyndŵr this, Glyndŵr that. He's a Welsh national hero. The best, it's a stupid way to describe it, but the best way to describe it to the layman is he's the Welsh William Wallace. That's essentially what he is. And he does deserve a big Hollywood film, to be fair. But the Tudor aspect, his cousins, are nowhere to be seen in this story. In England, they're not mentioned at all. The Welshness has been diminished. So they've just kind of disappeared. When you actually study and look into the history, as I've shown in my book, the Tudor family were there throughout that entire rebellion. I mean, it makes sense. Like, we can see that when the rebellion rises in Wales, the King of England gets his army and sends him into Wales, but he doesn't go for Glyndŵr. He goes directly to Anglesey, where the Tudor brothers are, which just underscores exactly their importance, their influence. And it's weird. I think they've been written out because there's a viewpoint in Wales of the Tudors just went off to England and became kings of England and then did nothing for Wales thereafter. And that's simply not true either. So it's a funny story that's just been untold in a Welsh context and in an English context. They've just fallen between the cracks until now. Yeah,
until your book. And actually, there's the history of them going back. I mean, you cover what, 4 centuries?
Yeah, about 300 years, yeah.
About 300 years. And they're actually little talked about, I think, or less well talked about, even once Henry, or in Henry's battle to become king, and once he's king. They're far more involved in the story.
Yeah. It's just interesting, like, again, when Henry's trying to become king, they're criticising the quality of his bloodline on both sides of his family tree. Richard III is obviously criticising the Beauforts for not having a good claim to the throne, but he's also criticising the low degree of his Welshness. And that's something that almost everybody who's even aware of the Welsh aspect of the Tudors to this day consider Henry's Welshness to have been just from a low background. I mean, there's even history that shows that he's just the grandson of a servant to the bishop. And that's how it's been written. Henry came from a poor quality background. Now, in his own time, he knew about these accusations, which is why he ordered a commission to be done to go into Wales to show who he was descended from. And it reveals that he comes from a high quality bloodline, a very deeply respected bloodline. I mean, his Welsh ancestors, at least the near ones that I talk about in my book, the 4 or 5 generations, they were the Welsh equivalent of an English noble family. They were revered amongst the Welsh. And if you go back even further on through the generations, what you get Henry's descended from all the great British and Welsh kings. And this played a major impact in how he viewed himself. He viewed himself as being before the Plantagenets. Like, his right to kingship in this country was even grander than anything the Plantagenets could offer. They were just newbies.
Yeah,
they only came
over
in,
yeah.
They came in 1066, whereas Henry could go back to the 5th and 6th centuries. That's why he uses the red dragon as his banner, because that comes from the 6th century king of the Britons, Cadwallader, and it's Welsh history that becomes English/British history that has been long underplayed.
Is it from Henry's sort of project into doing that we know so much about his lineage? Would that have been lost otherwise, do you think?
Yeah, I think it would have been lost. So he sends various doctors, church doctors, into Wales to examine his Welshness, and that creates the core of the material I could write my book with. But what's interesting is, so Gerald of Wales was a Welsh Norman writer who did a very famous journey through Wales written in the 1100s, and he records his viewpoint of travelling through Wales and meeting the Welsh. And it's a fascinating project that reveals much about the people that we know today. And the one thing Gerald said was the Welsh are not interested in money or property. They're obsessed with lineage. And every Welshman you meet can recite on order his entire ancestry going back to 8 or 9 generations. Now, I can't do that today with modern ancestry.com and so on, but the modern day, the medieval Welshman could do that. And this comes from almost from the concept of how, the naming system. The Welsh didn't use modern English style surnames, Jones, Edwards, etc. They were simply known by their first name, followed by ap, followed by their father's name. So it's called patronymics. So, you would have a Welshman called Rhys ap Gwilym. That means Rhys, the son of Gwilym. And they could carry that out. So let me see if I can get this right off the top of my head. So Henry Tudor in Welsh, going back through all of the lineages, would have been Harry ap Edmund ap Owain ap Meredith ap Tudur ap Gronwy ap Tudur ap Gronwy ap Ednyfed. So that's excellent. 8 or 9 generations, and most Welsh men could just recite that, and that's how they knew who they were related to. So they, there would have been quite a few Rhys ap Gronwy. There might have been a few of those, but how many Rhys ap Gronwy ap Tudur? Okay, if there were more than few people, go back another lineage. So that's how the Welsh all knew each other. Now, later on down the centuries, after the 1600s, the Welsh adopted English-style surnames, and what they did was they essentially took their father's name and anglicised it, and that created a Welsh surname. So let's take, for example, Pritchard. There was one guy who was called, let's say, Rhys ap Richard, and they just combined the ap and the Richard, and it becomes Pritchard. Powell ap Howell, Price ap Rhys. People whose fathers were John or Edward, they just became Jones and Edwards. So all these famous Welsh surnames we know today, Jones, Edwards, Griffiths, Williams, Evans, they themselves weren't Welsh names. They were just at some point the Welsh decided to become like the English and create a surname. And what the irony is that we've gone from this concept of the medieval Welshmen who all knew the ancestry inside out, including the Tudors, to modern day Welsh people like myself. When we want to come to do our family trees, it's nigh on impossible because there's just too many Griffiths, Jones, Evans. If I want to go back to the Victorians and find my ancestor called William Griffiths, there are 5 in every village. So it's very difficult to do your family tree now, whereas in the medieval period, they could just recite it. And that is the importance of what a lineage meant to a Welshman. Not land, not property. And I threw this with Henry Tudor. This idea that he didn't know or care about his Welshness goes against the very grain of what it meant to be a medieval Welshman. Now, did this carry on to Henry VIII? No. Henry VIII didn't care about anything but himself. We can say that the Welsh aspect of the Tudors ended with the death of Henry VII, but it's completely incorrect, and there's no evidence whatsoever to suggest anything other than Henry VII was and did have a deep affinity with his Welshness.
Do you think he was educating Arthur in that? Do you think if we'd have had Arthur as king, he would have continued with, respecting the Welsh lineage?
I think so. I mean, I've never thought about this, but Arthur was being moulded in his father's image. I mean, Arthur would have been a completely different king to his brother, Henry VIII. And Arthur was sent to Ludlow to be schooled in becoming a Prince of Wales. His name was Arthur. I mean, yes, I think he would have been very much on board with the whole Arthurian legend. The reason he was named Arthur is because his father wanted to symbolise a second Arthurian golden age was coming. And I think him being in Ludlow as a Prince of Wales, obviously today Ludlow is an English town, but back then those borders they weren't any borders. Ludlow was in many respects the capital of medieval Wales. So he's in the heart of Welsh territory, learning and hanging around Welsh people. So yes, I do think he would have been more Welsh, shall we say, than Henry VIII.
Interesting. And you mentioned earlier, one of the things that Henry VII is accused of is sort of taking the Welsh support when he needed it and then not doing anything for Wales once he becomes king. Is that fair?
No, it's not fair, it's nonsense, but it is the history that we currently understand it based on what's come down to us. And there's various reasons for this. I mean, primarily, the story of Henry VII as we know it as a modern audience was developed by the Victorian historians. Much of our history was designed by Victorian historians, and they were very big on Henry's judicial accomplishments, and the king he was in a civic manner, his laws and his money. They were very big on that. And this was the man who set England on the path to greatness. This is how they viewed it. And these were people living in an age of empire. England was the greatest country in the world, and Henry Tudor helped create this. The last thing they wanted to do was to amplify his Welshness. So the Welshness was gone. It was pushed to the side to the point where even today people say, well, Henry didn't care anything for his Welshness. The evidence is so against that. It's almost absurd for anyone to keep on towing that line. When Henry becomes king, first and foremost, he'd lived his first 14 years in Wales. First thing he does is he puts a red dragon on his coat of arms. He didn't need to appeal to the Welsh once he was King of England. If anything, appealing to the Welsh and being overly Welsh in sentiment would undermine his English crown. He did it because he felt something for it. His son was called Arthur. He funded St David's Day festivities. He loved Welsh cheese. He loved Welsh mead. There are copious references to him and his Welshness, keeping his Welsh family close to him. And he definitely viewed himself as a Welshman. Now, doing something for Wales, of course, the bards were hoping he would return independence to the Welsh people. And we have to remember, Wales didn't really exist then as it does now. The concept of Wales was a later creation under his son Henry VIII. During this period, Henry VII and before, there were Welsh people, the Cymro, but they presided over independent Welsh kingdoms of their own, and they would squabble with each other, very much like what England was under the Saxons. There wasn't England until 927. So when Henry becomes king, he now has control over parts of what we would call Wales. Other parts of what we would call Wales were called the Marcher Lordships, and they were controlled by various nobles. So Henry, when he becomes king, couldn't give independence to the Welsh because A, Wales didn't exist. He could not give independence to the part of Wales that he controlled because that's absurd. He's just invaded through that country. He's not going to open the door and give independence to a country he's just invaded through. That's just a security risk. No, what he decides to do is he's going to try and make life more bearable for the Welsh, because for the previous 300 years there's been a racial ceiling at play. The Welsh have been they've been made second-class citizens in their own nation because they've been conquered by the English and by the English lords, and they've not been permitted to own land. They've not been permitted to make marriages with English. They're not permitted to hold any offices. They very much are, it's almost a medieval apartheid. They're second-class citizens. When Henry becomes king, he allows Welshmen for the first time to hold offices. He allows Welshmen to hold real, tangible power. Like Sir Reep Thomas becomes Justiciar of South Wales. That is the most powerful role in South Wales, and had never been held by an Englishman for the previous 300 years. He allows a Welshman to become the Bishop of St David's, the first Welshman to hold that title in 300 years. He opens the door for Welshmen to become powerful. He removes the restrictions on the Welsh to allow them to accumulate land and power. Now, he dies in 1509, and this project is still underway. Fast forward to 1530s, many of the independent lordships in Wales that were held by English lords, they've come under crown control for various reasons. Death, people, being attainted for treason. And what this means is, in the 1530s, Henry VIII now essentially controls all of the lands that the Welsh people live in. And Thomas Cromwell enters, and Thomas Cromwell decides he's going to create Wales, essentially. It's called the Laws of Wales Acts. And this is very controversial to this modern day, because it creates Wales for the first time as a country. The borders that we know today have been created by Thomas Cromwell. He's obviously looking to bring it into England as a part of the Reformation. It's a very political act. And then he officially annexes Wales into England. So in 1536, Wales is created and instantly merged into England.
So it's sort of a way of packaging up all the lands of Wales into one entity so that it can be annexed to England.
And now they can rule it, they can govern it much easier. In the modern day, this has been viewed as a very negative act in Wales. This is the moment Wales was destroyed, is the viewpoint of many people who, quite frankly, are not seeing the context of the time. The Welsh people loved this because it removed all restrictions that have been put on them for the previous 300 years. They were now finally raised to an equal standing with the English. They were now allowed MPs. They were now allowed to hold officially offices and titles. Henry VII had given Welshmen titles, but to do so they had to almost get English citizenship to do it. Now all those restrictions removed. There was one clause that said you now have to do this in the English language, and this has been viewed in Wales as being the moment that the Tudors turned their back on Wales by destroying the Welsh language. Nonsense, because Wales was a majority Welsh speaking country as late as 1901. So 1536, it did not destroy the Welsh language in any way, shape or form. It simply meant if you want to become a civic official, you've got to do it in English, which again makes sense from a crown perspective. So it's interesting, the medieval Welshmen championed the Tudors. They viewed the Tudors as a good force for Wales, and many Welshmen made a lot of money for the first time and holding a lot of lands by working within the English system. Whatever the woes of Wales in the modern day, and as a Welshman there are many issues with modern day Wales, that is not something that can be put at the feet of the Tudors. I mean, I would look more towards the effects of industrialisation in the Victorian age, but that's a whole different subject. So when we say, to answer this question in a very long rambling way, that the Tudors did nothing for Wales, which is the prevailing argument and narrative today, no, quite frankly, the medieval, the 15th century, 16th century Welshman would think you were talking nonsense. I'll give you just one simple example. On the march to Bosworth with Henry Tudor was a chap called Dafydd Sesecht. Even for a Welshman, it's a very difficult name to say. And I've got a lisp, and it's very difficult. So Dafydd Sesecht, and he joined Henry Tudor. He goes, yes, I'll come and join your march to battle. Henry Tudor becomes king. Henry Tudor rewards all the Welshmen that were with him, and this guy gets a little bit of land in Northamptonshire. His grandson is Lord Burleigh. Sesecht becomes anglicised to Cecil, and it's interesting that these two guys marching on the road to Bosworth, who would they have ever conceived that their grandchildren, Elizabeth I and Lord Burleigh, would govern England together? And the Cecils are a perfect example of a family who were able to attain greatness under the Tudors. That would have been impossible under the reign of Richard III or any other English king. It was the Tudors that were able to help Welshmen make their money. And of course, we see what happened to the Scots under the Stewards. So did Henry VII do anything for Wales? Not Wales, but Welshmen he did a lot for, and Welsh ladies too, I presume.
If you help the men, you should help the women by virtue of that. Well, I'm glad you've set the record straight on that. And so let's roll it back then. So when Henry lands, this is a second attempt at invasion, isn't it? 1485. What's happened? Is it 1480?
So in 1483 there is a rebellion under the name of the Duke of Buckingham. Again, because we know how the story ends, it's been rewritten both by the Tudors and modern historians that in 1483 the first attempt, this Buckingham's rebellion, was all about putting Henry Tudor on the throne. It wasn't. If you look at the evidence, the Duke of Buckingham had a better claim to Henry. He was his older cousin, and he was a nobleman who was the number 2 in the land. He doesn't rebel against Richard III to become number 6 or 7 in Henry Tudor. He does it to become king. So Buckingham rebels in 1483, and he sends a letter to Henry saying, land with your army in Dorset, and we'll march together via Salisbury and we'll invade. Henry gets to the coast of Dorset and he sees some soldiers on the coast beckoning him to land. He thinks there's something amiss. It turns out they're Richard III's men. Henry goes back to France. When it's his turn to invade 2 years later, it's now about him. He's not going to land in Dorset now. He was doing that because Buckingham had told him to. He's now going home. He knows where his support is. It's Wales. There are bards spreading the message that Henry Tudor is one of us. Henry Tudor is the son of prophecy. The Welsh prophecies have foretold somebody's coming to save us. The man they claim that is now Henry Tudor. So he goes home. He goes to Pembrokeshire where he was born, and he lands there. And he marches through the heart of Wales, sending out letters to all the most influential Welshmen of the day, either demanding they come and support him or they step aside. That's exactly what happens. Henry gets to Welshpool on the 15th of August 1485, so about a week before the Battle of Bosworth, and it is there that thousands of Welshmen from north and south flock to his banner, including a guy called Reep Thomas, who at this time is the most powerful Welshman there is, but he's got no lands, he's got no power, he's got no money, but his influence amongst the Welsh is through the roof, because Welshmen weren't allowed to hold actual titles of power under English rule. And Reep Thomas says to him, I don't know for definite, I wasn't there, but obviously let's paraphrase, he says, Henry, my distant cousin, okay, I have 2,000 men who will fight for you, but you've got to give me some power. And Henry goes, yeah, of course, I'm going to make you the Justiciar of South Wales. And Rees goes, okay, let's go to battle. And of course, there's a suggestion it was Rees or Rees's men who were involved in the death of Richard III, Henry's Welsh bodyguard that were near him at the climax of Bosworth. And Reep Thomas is one of the great victors of Bosworth. He does become Chief Justiciar of South Wales, unthinkable a week earlier under Richard III. He becomes Constable of the Royal Castles of Brecon, Carmarthen and Cardiganshire. He gets knighted, and he becomes inducted into the Order of the Garter, which is the most prestigious order that the English have. Only 24 men can be in that order at any one time. It's always been the preserve of high-ranking English noblemen, and Reep Thomas from Carmarthenshire gets inducted, and that is the ultimate sign of Henry Tudor's affection and willingness to raise up Welshmen if they serve him. I mean, what's interesting, just circle back to the Arthur scenario. Arthur was being raised in Ludlow as Prince of Wales, and his best friend, the man who was groomed to be at his side throughout, was Sir Reep Thomas's son Griffith. They were, best buddies. I mean, we all know that later on Henry VIII has a circle of courtiers around him, Charles Brandon, William Compton, these famous names. Arthur had Griffith, and Arthur dies at 15, and Griffith's future is essentially destroyed because he was supposed to rise high. Who knows what he would have become as number 2, the best friend to the king, and he kind of fades a little bit into obscurity because, well, it's all now about the other prince, the future Henry VIII, and all his mates who suddenly have their world turned upside down by being best friends, not with the Duke of York, but with the future king. And when Griffiths dies 25 years later, he requests to be buried near Arthur. And anyone who goes to Worcester Cathedral will know the very famous chantry chapel of Arthur Tudor. It's a wonderful display showing all of the Yorkist and Lancastrian badges, and the Welsh dragon, of course. But just off behind this chantry chapel is another tomb, and it's Griffiths' tomb, the son of Reep Thomas, Arthur Tudor's best friend. You know, who knows what would have become of these men had they lived and prospered. There was, again, Henry's army at Bosworth had a very distinct Welsh flavour to it, and it has been underplayed, and there's no reason why it should have been.
No. It's interesting. I've been to Worcester Cathedral. It's my sort of local cathedral, if you like, so many times, and I've never realised that he's there, so I'm going to go and have a look. We're taking a group there actually in September, so I'm going to go and have a look while we're there. So he's got Welsh support going through Wales, picking it up. Isn't there some story when he gets to Shrewsbury of having to step over some Englishmen? What was that story?
Yeah, so there's a guy called Thomas Mitten who's the constable or the sheriff of Shrewsbury, and he's a Ricardian loyalist, and he sworn an oath that he would uphold the reign of King Richard III, and he's refusing to let Henry Tudor march through his city. He's not having it. This Henry Tudor's a rebel. You're not coming to my city. No, my king is Richard III. Word soon reaches Thomas Mitten, stand aside now. And we believe the word comes from William Stanley, who is the most powerful man in that area on behalf of his brother Thomas Stanley. Now, there's a lot made about the Stanley's treachery at Bosworth in support of Richard III. And there's very good grounds to believe they always were planning to turn their back on Richard. This wasn't a last-minute decision at the battle. The plan was already set. And William Stanley comes and he advises William Mitten to open the gates. And Thomas Mitten, he agrees that he will stand aside, but he swore an oath. His oath to Richard was, no rebel will come into my city unless over my dead body. And oaths mean a lot to these people. So the story goes, and it's quite believable because it's in quite a contemporary chronicle of Shrewsbury, that he lies down and Henry steps over him. And therefore he stepped over this man over his belly, and Mitten is happy that, okay, my oath has been upheld, and Henry goes in Shrewsbury, has a pint, has some food, and continues to march on through without.
This English beer's no good.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Welsh mead.
You say that you get good beer in Shrewsbury these days, and this is commemorated in Shrewsbury to this day. There's a famous old house, a 16th century townhouse, where local tradition says Henry stayed there. Now, Henry didn't stay there because we know he didn't stay overnight in Shrewsbury, but I can believe he might have taken a meal there, and it's called Henry Tudor House, and that does have a very good pub in it to this day.
Excellent. I'm going to have to go and visit. And he does pick up a lot of English support as well, though, doesn't he?
He does. So as soon as he crosses into England, a group called the Talbots join him, and the Talbots are related to the Stanleys. So they join. Sir Richard Corbett comes from Worcestershire, related to the Stanleys, pledges his army, and Henry starts to get thousands more Englishmen. Now, the Stanleys do not openly side with him until the fateful last minutes of Bosworth, but this army is starting to build up. And yeah, Henry's army, by the time he gets to Bosworth, is a very cosmopolitan, Welsh, French, there's some Scottish, and of course English. Should it still have beaten Richard III? No.
What are the relative army sizes once they get to Bosworth?
Very controversial number. Yeah, I mean, all battle numbers are controversial because we don't really know, but rough guesses are Richard would have had about 8,000, Henry would have had about 4,000, and the Stanleys would have had about 4,000.
Oh, the Stanleys are a big player.
It still hinges on the Stanleys. What side are they going to come down on? And Henry wanted them, from all accounts, to join his side at the battle, and they wouldn't side with him, but there's good reasons for that. Richard had the Stanley heir in his possession, and if the Stanleys had openly shown themselves to be traitors, that boy's head would have been chopped off. So the Stanleys refused to openly side with Henry, until that very last moment when Richard's about to kill Henry and the Stanleys finally intercede.
Yeah. Wade in
And change the course of English history forever.
Obviously your book's called Son of Prophecy and concludes with kind of this idea that Henry turns out to be the son of prophecy, or at least in the bard's eyes perhaps. How early on do you think Henry had any real idea that, right, I'm going for the throne? When does that actually happen?
So if what I say is correct, and I believe it to be correct, that 1483 rebellions were about Buckingham, and Henry's plan was to support Buckingham and come back to England just to be the Earl of Richmond, I believe the earliest we have any evidence Henry himself was being raised up as a king is the 3rd of November. Because on the 3rd of November 1483, by which point the princes have disappeared, there is a group of rebels in Cornwall who say they are going abroad and they're going to come back with an alternative king. And that king is believed to have been Henry Tudor. The reason that's important is because the day before, the 2nd of November, in Salisbury, the Duke of Buckingham is executed. So the Duke of Buckingham's out of the way. A bunch of rebels have already rebelled. They can't turn back now. They've got to do something. They go, oh, do you know what? Henry Tudor, he could be the next king. So I would suggest the 3rd of November 1483 is the first time Henry's mentioned as a king. And Christmas Day is the day he swears an oath to marry Elizabeth of York and unite the houses. So Christmas Day is the first time we have evidence of him saying he's going to be king. 3rd of November is the earliest we have evidence of anyone else saying he's going to be a king. And before that, there's nothing. But of course, once he does become king, history's written in a way that he was always being championed as the king. 1483 was always about him from the outset. There's no evidence about that.
And his mother gets tarnished with that sort of, that idea of this ambitious woman who's always thought that her son should be king. That's all part and parcel of that rewriting?
It is, yeah. I mean, she clearly was the main instigator behind the rebellion against Richard III. But that begins in the reign of Richard III. There's no evidence whatsoever that up until he becomes king and creates this fracture within the House of York, that she ever had any ideas for him being a king. Because, as people rightly point out, there were too many people ahead of him in any prospective line of succession. I mean, again, one thing that needs to be clarified is there was no such thing as a line of succession during this day. If you go on Wikipedia today, you can look at the full official legal British line of succession going down to at least the person in number 100. I mean, once you get past number 25, we've never even heard of these people. They're random daughters of dukes in this country. But in the medieval times, there was no such thing. You had the king and you had the heir. You didn't have, I'm 8th in line to the throne. So that's another thing people misunderstand about modern history, that X person had a better claim than Y person. The king was the king.
Right to the throne.
Yeah,
kind of idea.
You make a play for it and you become the king. I mean, the Game of Thrones stole their entire ideas from this period. So Margaret Beaufort definitely didn't have these long-term ambitions for her son to be king, because there was always a king and an heir. Until Richard III becomes king, and then suddenly it's all bets off. We can topple him and make Buckingham the king. Oh, Buckingham's gone and got his head chopped off. We'll put Henry Tudor on the throne. And that's when she started to have those ambitions for him. So, yeah, it's a shame that it's been rewritten that Margaret Beaufort was some sort of weird, fanatic woman who from birth was obsessed with making her son king. The idea that in 1457, when Henry Tudor was born, that he ever becomes a king of England is one of the most absurd stories of all time. It's just absurd. I mean, even in 1482, you had Edward IV, who had 2 sons, the heir and the spare. He had a brother, Richard III, Richard Duke of Gloucester, actually. He had a nephew, the Earl of Warwick. He had another nephew, John de la Poer. All these people in 1482 would have been king before Henry Tudor would have been king, you know. Yes, there was a line of succession, but as one gets toppled, the next gets pushed to the fore. That's just how it worked. But Richard upset the apple cart. He messed everything up for himself and for the House of York.
There's one the one extra area I want to ask you about before we finish up, and I've got some questions from patrons who've put some questions in for you. I think I said a bit earlier how the Tudors' story, obviously before Henry becomes king, has been hardly known about at all until your book, thankfully. But also, they're around once he becomes king. So who out of the Tudor family are around Henry once he becomes king?
So there's his uncle Jasper, who becomes the most powerful noble in the country. He gets created Duke of Bedford, and he's able to retire in relative peace for the last 10 years of his life. But he also has another uncle called David Owen, who is the bastard child of his grandfather, Owen Tudor. And he becomes Henry's chief carver. Carves his meat at every dinner. Sounds like a low job, actually a very high job, but a well-paid job and a very important job. And there's another uncle who, just to make things simple, I shall call Owen Tudor Jr., who was Jasper Tudor's brother. People don't realise, as a baby he was raised by monks in Westminster Abbey, and he watched all of the Wars of the Roses unfold from Westminster Abbey, and suddenly his nephew becomes king, and Henry knows this, and Henry rewards him, and when he dies, Henry has all the bells of Westminster rung for his uncle. It's quite a nice, sweet touch. So Henry definitely does surround himself with the survivor members of the family. And he pays for the tombs of his father and grandfather to be rebuilt. There's no suggestion whatsoever that he sought to distance himself from his Welshness and his Welsh family. That simply just did not happen.
So intrigued by Owen Tudor Jr. It's very...
well, what I didn't realise was, still somebody pointed out, it might have been you actually, was you? Yeah, that Owen Tudor Jr., as we call him, was at Westminster Abbey, probably, in 1483, when the Prince in the Tower, the whole debacle about that. He would have been very close to power. Did he play any role in the machinations taking place?
Woodville was there in Sanctuary, potentially.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah. Well, maybe there's something in some archive somewhere that will give us some juicy information about that. So, last question before I move on. Is there anything that you don't get asked about Henry VII that you wish you did get opportunity to speak to him?
If I'm being honest, no. I do so many talks and things.
You get to cover it all there.
Yeah. I think I've covered everything I need to cover.
Okay, then what's something that people have the most trouble kind of getting their head round? I don't know, something that's really, now you've got into the story so much, it's really obvious, but people are like, what?
I think it's the idea that he was a miser. He's history's most famous miser. Ebenezer Scrooge aside, the man who was greedy and took everyone's money, and that was a horrible, evil tyrant. And I say, yes, okay, he was greedy. The word we're looking for is avaricious. He was greedy, but he was not a miser. A miser squirrels all their money away and lives their life with holes in their shoes. Henry Tudor spent remarkably. I mean, he was one of our country's biggest spending kings. He loved to treat his family. He loved to spend money on jewels and furs and reward people. He just didn't want anyone else to have any money because money equals power. And he gets criticised for this, and he's called a tyrant. And my attitude to that is, yes, I'll accept he's a financial tyrant, but the kings before and after him used the sword to enforce their will. They killed. Henry Tudor didn't kill. So would you rather lose your coin, or would you rather lose your head? I'd rather live under a king that takes my money, but lets us live. I think that's one of the things that people still, because it's so ingrained in our concept that he was the dour miser king, the boring one, that it's hard to unpick.
I had a Leary Lynn on my channel not too long ago, and we were talking about Henry VII's spending, and that came through very clearly when she was talking about how much he used to spend on clothes and jewels. It's like, oh no, he definitely didn't have an issue with getting his purse out for things he wanted to spend on. Thank you so much for your time.
No problem, thank you.